First to Queensland, where the state Labor government, perhaps with one eye on next year's election, is set to throw a protective cordon around prime farmland at the expense of gas and mining developments. Not surprisingly, the resources sector says Anna Bligh's gone too far. Yet farmers in one of the state's best cropping areas are angry too that an exemption's already been given to a proposed coal mining project. And as Peter McCutcheon found during a visit to Queensland's Central Highlands, defining what constitutes prime farmland is proving just as difficult.
Late winter and early spring is a quiet time for central Queensland crop farmers. It's an occasion for some quiet maintenance before a storm of activity when the harvest gets underway. But this year, Ben Sullivan is anything but calm.
We don't know where we're going with anything at the moment. You don't know really what it is. They seem to be telling you stories, but they're hollow type of stories. You don't really know.
These stories are about mining, or more particularly a proposed coal mine under wheat crops. And also widespread scepticism in the farming community about the Queensland government's attempts to restrict mining in one of Australia's food bowls.
We feel like we're a political football at the moment, bouncing from one side to the other, and really we're ready to grasp onto anything to help the farming community.
Protecting the best of cropping land doesn't necessarily have to involve a prohibition. It can involve a balance, it can involve cooperation.
Queensland is the first government in Australia to attempt to draw a line in the soil. It's produced a map of what it calls possible strategic cropping country, covering about 4% of the state, and set aside 2 areas for special protection, the Darling Downs in the south and the so-called Golden Triangle in the Central Highlands.
We have good enough science that we can tell just what is the best quality ag land, and we are preventing that from being mined or otherwise alienated, so we'll know we've got it for the future.
The original mining lease was great.
But the plan has failed to impress these farmers, who call themselves the Golden Triangle Action Group.
9.82% of the Fitzroy catchment is under mineral development licence or mineral licence at the moment.
Despite being in a protected area, they say they're under increasing pressure by resource exploration companies. Do you feel you're under siege here?
Absolutely. We feel like we're powerless to, with the encroachment of mining within the area.
Yet you have been declared a protected area as far as cropping is concerned. Doesn't that give you some comfort?
Well, initially it did, but we're seeing, as what often happens, a constant eroding and a constant watering down of what was intended to be a good policy.
Gordon Stall is the latest farmer to bring news of yet another mining company in the region.
2 weeks ago, I had a call that an EPC had been granted on our property and that they wanted to start drilling. And
that's an exploration permit.
Yeah, that's an exploration permit for coal, the drilling program, is done for them to shore up what's there with the potential of a mine in maybe 5 years' time.
It's a very unique region within central Queensland. We've been around for 127, 130 years now. It's an ideal cropping area and it needs to be protected for the future of Australia and the world's food and fibre resources.
Drilling rigs like this one have become increasingly common in this cropping country over the past 4 years or so. Now, this might not result in a mine, it's for exploration only, but farmers are deeply worried.
In the last 12, 18 months, they've done 22 holes, I think, on our property. And they're going to the neighbours. They've been neighbours both sides of us now, and they seem to have really put a lot of effort into speeding everything up at the moment.
Now, some of these holes have been dug by Bandanna Energy, which wants to develop an underground coal mine here by 2014. The company doesn't necessarily see proposed strategic cropping legislation as an obstacle.
Providing that it is not on a prohibition status, providing that it allows for either offsets, that it allows for a common sense approach, and I think the government to date has demonstrated that. If there is a common sense approach, I see that there's a lot of scope for mining companies being able to go out and embrace the principles and contribute to the agricultural sector. It's all going to be new ground, there's no doubt about that, but I think that where there's a will, there's a way.
Bandanna Energy's chief executive, Ray Shaw, says the reason why the company can mine in a protected area is because it had invested considerable money into its project before the Queensland government decided to change the law.
As a new generation miner, where we're looking forward to the challenge of being able to get out there and basically work with the community, become, if you like, an active player in the agricultural, in ensuring that the agriculture can coexist with mining, and showing that it is possible.
Bandanna is a project that was right on the cusp of getting a stage of its environmental approval done at the time when government announced its policy in May.
Queensland's Minister for Resources, Rachel Nolan, says Bandanna had legal rights that couldn't be ignored.
The call we made was that that mine could only proceed if it went underground and if there were very strong standards around rehabilitation, and we will legislate those standards. So, bottom line, a judgment call needed to be made. It has to be an underground mine, and that will be set rock solid in legislation.
Well, to what extent, though, does it undermine your legislation? You've got something, you've declared a protection zone, you could very well have a mine on it.
I think the answer to that, in my view, is not at all does it undermine the intent of the policy.
Farmers in the Golden Triangle beg to differ.
When they used the word protection, we were expecting protection. The Wild Rivers protection means that there's no development on those areas, and protection for us would have meant that there would be no mining above or below on strategic cropping land.
Now, rehabilitation sounds great in theory, but farmers here say cropping is a precision science, as demonstrated by this re-levelling of cotton fields damaged in the last wet season.
I don't see how you can take something out from lower down, that it's not going to subside on the top, and that's going to change the way water flows, and it's going to make it near impossible to grow crops. And we've asked to take us somewhere and prove to us so we can feel safe in ourselves and our kids' future to show us where this has been done, but I'm still waiting.
Substance could be anywhere from 0 up to perhaps a metre based on preliminary work, that is well within the tolerances of what is manageable from a restoration viewpoint.
And that's a view the Queensland government supports.
We are genuinely confident that both farming and mining will be able to coexist in this case.
But it's a bit of a leap of faith, isn't it, for farmers, given that, as you say, something like this hasn't happened in Australia before?
I think there is reasonable evidence that these two things can reasonably coexist in this case. Cropping will be able to continue. The mine will proceed because they had a very strong legal case. And that, in my view, provides what is in the circumstance a reasonable balance between the two.
So it's business as usual in the Central Highlands cropping country. Crops have been grown, harvested and transported from this region for more than 100 years. But some farmers here are asking whether they'll be around for another century.
Everyone's worried about what's happening. No one knows any certainty yet, and that's what everyone's chasing. To say where we can, are we protected or aren't we protected, but we need to know.